Hey everybody, Scoots here. You'll probably hear this. I guess if you're a patron, you won't hear this on the show. So I'm recording these videos, but if you're a free listener, you'll also hear this on the podcast. And I'm going to try to do these maybe once a week or every other week, and I'll keep repeating them because I got some feedback recently um, related to the free podcast, and this is something I haven't been great at communicating. Is that like the show? I don't just sit down and record the show for an hour and it gets released. It takes a team of people to put the show out every single week, twice a week. To make the show sound free and easy, it takes an incredible amount of work, and not just my hard work, but a lot of other people's hard work. Um, and I think I should be celebrating it. So I'm going to introduce you kind of, and maybe I can do a better job if we keep repeating this, of people that are working behind the scenes on the show, because it isn't just simple me sit down, I record into a mic, think stuff up off the top of my head for an hour, and then it comes right out. That's definitely not how the show works, though I can totally understand um, how people might think that. And also, our show does not receive any outside funding. Like, our show is funded by Patreon and the people that support the sponsors. Because I've just gotten some feedback around that, and it was just like, I was like, oh, wait a second, like, I really need to clear this up and be a better communicator about this stuff. So the first person I'm going to introduce is the person who has been with the show the longest, and that's Chris Postill, or Chris Posterson from Sounds Like an Earful. If you're listening to the show, I put two of Chris's websites in the comments here, because Chris designs websites and does audio over at Sounds Like an Earful. And Chris did the theme song for the show. And let me just read the bio. Well, where is it? Oh boy, I lost it, of course. Typical Scoots here. But Chris did the theme song for the show. Doom, 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 doom. And it's been so long that, like, my memory may be incorrect of how I met Chris. But I believe it was on a podcasting community online. And I met Chris in, I believe this is what happened, but I could be totally wrong. Is that Chris was like, "Hey, if you have a podcast, like, I will make you a theme song for it." And let's see, yeah, Chris Postal. You may know him as Posty Posterson. Chris has worked as an audio engineer and has had his work as a composer featured on podcasts including Sleep With Me, Odd Hobby, Song Spotters, Comatose, Bush League, and many more. Chris lives and works in Atlantic, Canada. You usually find him in his workshop every morning, tinkering away with his noisemakers and electronics, trying to compose something interesting for his website. But anyway, back to post to post. So I believe this would happen. It was like, hey, Chris was pretty active in this one early podcasting community. This is 2013, 2014, 2015. And I don't know if we connected first, but I think it was around that time when I was like, man, I could use the theme song. So I was using Creative Commons audio and looking for something that would work for Sleep With Me, a theme song, like a instrumental theme song. And I don't know if I listened to Chris's podcast at the time first, which was Sounds Like an Earful, or we started working on the theme song and going back and forth about that. But I started listening to this podcast Chris was making at the time, Sounds Like an Earful, and it was a produced podcast, which is different than Sleep With Me, meaning it. I don't know if it was recorded linearly, but it was recorded in different locations. Like, Chris would take the bus, then he would call his friend Colleen, and then they would talk about something, and each episode had a theme, and it was interrelated, a bit more like cinematic than Sleep With Me. And I was so impressed because I knew just from making Sleep With Me the incredible amount of hard work that goes into it. And anytime you're switching locations and like weaving in audio and sound effects and on location background audio, like, it was just so impressive. I could tell his skill set. And eventually, when I started the Patreon, the initial goal was, like, Chris and I worked out a rate, what his rate was, or it probably was a discounted rate, thanks Posty, at the time. And it was like, okay, this is how much I could charge you to add an episode of Sleep With Me. And so the Patreon started because I couldn't keep the show going. Like there was just I was paying for everything with the podcast through my day job, and then after I left work, I was working on the podcast so it'd come out. And so it was like, oh, if I can get some money through Patreon, I can start paying Chris to edit episodes, do a first pass edit, um, and one episode a week, and then it was 2 episodes a week. And so eventually that happened, and then Chris has been editing episodes of the podcast since then. And the show would not exist without these people. Like I was literally, I can picture myself like editing at lunch, like, and then editing on the BART and on the bus, and then editing when I got home for episodes that would come out at 5 o'clock that I'd recorded the night before. Like that was what the podcast used to look like, because everything was supported through me working on the like working in order to be able to do the podcast at night and stuff. And just that time of Chris like editing the show, it cleared me up to like be able to answer more email or do other things that would allow the podcast to keep going, like other work that I wasn't able to do on the podcast. And it's still the case today. Like I could never, like, that's one of the huge, the, the, the initial edits that Chris or Carl do, who I'll introduce to you later, is one of the many key cogs in Sleep With Me. Like, so it's like after recording, and some other time I'll talk about that, but it's like I upload the stuff, and Chris and Carl both are very like we just have very good working relationships. They're very professional. So if you have a lot of money and you want to hire them for something, by all means do it. But it is a matter of like we have great working relationship, and like we kind of work like we've moved, our working relationship has moved beyond deadlines because we just know each other's working, and if a deadline changes, it's like, hey, do you know when this audio is going to be ready? I need it sooner than I thought. So literally Sleep With Me would not exist without all these people that work at the show, starting with Posterson, who's been working with the show since, I have no idea when we started paying him. Whenever the Patreon started, maybe even before that, probably was before that. And I was just using my fund money or whatever, like I was paying for it out of my pocket. Like, but it was like, it was such a huge relief to me because I knew, I was like, people are listening to the show and benefiting from it, but I can't keep it going and I need help. And also the thing with Sleep With Me that I've learned is that it should be paid help, paid at like a paid work. Free work just creates a unhealthy environment. But also it's just different. Like it's a lot easier for me to that's why we have a good professional relationship, because I'm able to say, hey, can you fix this? I just noticed this thing. Or hey, do you think you could, like, are you able to get this to me a little bit sooner? Or hey, can I give you whatever it is. So I could not do it without a lot of people. And Posterson is one of those people. So thanks, Posty. And yeah, check out Posty's websites. You can buy the theme music on there. If you have a podcast or a creative project, there's music. There's just read more about Posty and the work Posty does. Thanks, Posterson.